You would recall that it was on the 20th of February 2019, I gave a report to the Parliament on the submission to and the deliberation of the Cabinet on the report from the Cannabis Marijuana Commission, which was presented in January of 2019. I reported then that Cabinet had accepted the unanimous recommendations of the Marijuana Commission set out in paragraph A of Chapter 11 of the said report. And I highlighted 9 unanimous recommendations. I promised then that our Attorney General would in due course cause legislation to be brought to the Honorable National Assembly for passage. Less than 3 months after the 20th of February 2019, the Office of the Attorney General has delivered and has caused the Cannabis Bill 2019 to come before our Parliament today. I want to commend our Attorney General and of course commend in particular his drafting team for the expeditious manner in which they have moved to bring this legislation to the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, between 20th of February and now, many developments have happened and some have evolved from where they were. And one should therefore recognize that the bill that we have brought to Parliament today reflect some further thoughts on the issue of the decriminalization of marijuana use. We have listened to the views expressed and we took note of a number of pertinent developments. We are always, as a team unity government, determined to do right by our people and country. And so the Cannabis Bill of 2019 reflects some of those policy evolutions. I would be among those who say that this is a reformist and enlightened piece of legislation that appropriately responds to the popular will of our population. And in some ways, the bill which we are bringing approximate similar international developments that have gone before us in terms of legislation in the USA, in Canada, and in Europe. The aim of the team unity government as a general rule is to place St. Kitts and Nevis among the most advanced and forward-looking countries in the world. While countries before us, for example, Jamaica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, have passed the version of the Cannabis Bill, our bill, when it comes to committee, will grant legislative approval for and regulate the use of cannabis for medicinal, for religious, and recreational purposes. In other words, we have cut across the 3 broad gamut that had been the subject of discussion regionally and elsewhere with respect to the issues to do with marijuana. And we want to make it clear that with respect to the use for recreational purposes, this of course will only be countenanced in the context of the use in the privacy of one's home. And so that aspect of it will, once we get through the legislative agenda, will no longer be considered a criminal offense. I gather from the legal advice that what we have attempted to do in moving beyond the issue of medicinal use to include the other two broad streams of areas contemplated under the issue of marijuana decriminalization is basically to take note of the constitutional right, the right to privacy, and the establishment of free conscience in the application of this particular legislation. So the bill, in short, that we have brought, and which will go through some refinements to committee stages, has gone the full gamut and is no longer be restricted solely to the use for medicinal purposes. I want, of course, as I've done before, to pay tribute to the quality of work which the commissioners have put before the cabinet and the country. It was a quality report that they were able to put together after some 17 or so months of engagement with the public. And it has become a model as to how these kinds of controversial matters ought to be addressed in order to bring on board the inclusive approach to governance which our Team Unity administration has brought to the fore. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the matter which we are addressing and which is before the Parliament is an item whose time has come, and the Team Unity government is moving to legislate the decriminalization of marijuana, cannabis, and set a framework for the orderly use, legal use of this. Today then is a red letter day for our country. The government today will advance the first reading of the bill, and in the not too distant future then, St. Kitts and Nevis, the smallest country in the Western Hemisphere, will provide a legal framework that represents the most modern and perhaps most comprehensive response to the issues relating to marijuana use. While many countries have revamped their laws governing cultivation and use of cannabis in keeping with the popular will of their respective nationals, St. Kitts and Nevis is still governed by the Prohibitive Drugs Act of 1986. And this act forbids cultivation, possession, and use of marijuana. In fact, I'm advised that those prohibitions date back to a predecessor law of 1937, some 82 years ago. We could all agree that some of the provisions of that act would have become anachronistic and irrelevant in light of recent scientific findings on cannabis use and of changes in societal norms. This is borne out in the findings of the National Commission on Marijuana. The St. Kitts and Nevis National Commission discovered that nationals now have a much more liberal approach on all matters relating to marijuana, and they advocated a new legal and administrative regime. This too conforms with the report of the CARICOM Marijuana Commission, which in like fashion recommended to CARICOM heads at a meeting of the heads in Jamaica that we need to move to make legislative changes to reflect a modern view of marijuana and its use. Our commissioners found that 63.1% of the participants of the prevalence of use survey wanted legislative change or amendments to the Drugs Act. And over 50% felt that marijuana should be decriminalized or legalized for medicinal purposes. And that was the only unanimous recommendation that the Commission had put to the government. And as a consequence of that, Mr. Speaker, we had intended initially to move in phases. Today we have gone beyond this. With regards to recreational use, 33.7% felt that there should be decriminalization for recreational use, and 28% felt that it should be legalized for this purpose. A smaller number, only 27% felt that there should be legalization for sacramental reasons. Through this bill, we will be implementing the essential recommendations of the Commission and the broader societal views. The bill, of course, will ensure protection of our young people, and so there's a prescribed age that has been identified in the bill having regard to the benefit of medical science and the impact of marijuana on young people. And the bill will tighten the regulatory system and modernizes the legislative arm. It should be made clear that while we are happy to present a bill that mirrors the revised national viewpoint on marijuana use, that we should be clear that the law is still on the books, and before the law is strange, persons are expected to comply with the legislation. We want, therefore, to warn persons who would seek to illegally exploit the relaxation of marijuana law that has been proposed, and to warn them that the extant laws remain until they are otherwise amended or repealed. We have been reliably informed that certain international business predators and pirates, aided by unsavory local elements, are positioning themselves to venture into plant cultivation to the detriment of locals, particularly our Rastafarian brethren. And some of those actors are seen in photo ops recently with unpatriotic persons with checkered past who see the freeing up of the herb in St. Kitts and Nevis as an opportunity for them to profit at the expense of our local people. We are told that some persons are assuring foreign interests of preferential treatment in return for underhanded funding for their ambitious pursuits. Misguided local operatives are promising land giveaways of up to 300 acres to their friends and associates. Let me make it clear that this government has not granted any license to anyone to import plants and seeds in the context of certain releases that we have seen of late. The government has not had any conversation with any foreigner about setting up businesses to trade in cannabis. It would be irresponsible of us to do so at this time, since there's still a lot of work to be done. The legislative hurdle has not yet been cleared, and the requisite systems are still being worked on. I wish to reaffirm today, Mr. Speaker, that non-nationals would not be permitted to secure advantages over nationals of our federation as we set about to build out a marijuana industry. I declare that those making such promises, and there have been photos in display with prominent persons, with those who are aspiring to come here, and we gather the plan to go to Dominica too. We have no control over what happens in Dominica, but we certainly will not allow that to happen here. We will always put the interests of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis first. We therefore warn the public not to be misled by the antics of persons who are unpatriotic, indeed by nature and indeed. I want to advise our citizens to be watchful and wary of any persons who are seeking to consort with international operatives to rob us of our patrimony. It will not be the first time that the lands of our country are secretively puffed away out of local ownership in the efforts of some to make them available to foreign interests. We have had in the past, in this very country, in northeastern St. Christopher, over 100 acres of land being made available to a foreigner for agricultural purposes in the area just outside St. Paul's, Belmont Estate Farm, it was called. While that was happening, farmers in St. Paul's and Newton Ground could not get 1 acre of land. But the government of the day provided arrangements for a non-national to benefit to the tune of over 100 acres of our land. In a similar manner, the Vesting of Certain Lands Act, which was passed during the tenure of the bygone administration, had the impact of putting the land price so high that our local persons would not have been able to afford the land. So when we see photos of persons bragging and boasting that they have made arrangement for 300 acres of land, you could be sure that is not government policy at work. That is not how Team Unity will do business. And that is not a venture in which we will engage, because it gives priority to foreign interests above those of our locals. I want to make the point further in relation to the pattern of alienation that has become part and parcel of the policy description of the Douglas administration of the past and continues to be that policy. 852 acres of land in the peninsula was appropriated by the former government, and it disadvantaged one of our sons of the soil in Dr. Wycliffe Beard. So we have a pattern of that kind of behavior. This to me represents a sordid history of an unpatriotic era which will never be repeated under Team Unity. So, Mr. Speaker, the introduction of the bill today is indeed a red letter day in our federation. It represents the timely and careful modernization of our primary drug legislation, and it places the law in sync with the pulse of our citizens and, of course, with the trends of the times. I warn our people, in this regard, only the Team Unity government can be trusted to ensure that our local people are no way disadvantaged and marginalized in the efforts of our country to build out a marijuana industry. Again, beware of those who have already promised foreign interests, and it is important to Google them, and you will find that these are illicit actors with whom persons are consorting to again rob our people of their patrimony. And this government will not stand for it.